In ancient Egypt, many things happened that we can no longer accept today. Prostitution was very normal, even if the woman did not want it. But it gets even weirder when you know at what age sex was normal in ancient Egypt, because that will scare you. Sacred sin. Like in ancient Babylon, prostitution was seen as a divine and respectable act done for the gods. In contrast to modern prostitution, prostitutes had a rather high social position in ancient Egypt. Prostitution is restricted to illicit, behind-the-scenes activities in many countries. However, in ancient Egypt, prostitutes were permitted to operate openly and freely. To identify and distinguish themselves from non-prostitutes, they would tattoo themselves and use red lipstick and other cosmetics. It's possible that prostitution was a very widespread activity that the Egyptians saw as simply another profession with certain social prestige. However, unlike Babylon, the locations where prostitutes could serve customers were restricted. The use of contraception was mostly effective. The ancient Egyptians used a range of contraceptive techniques to prevent unintended births. The most effective contraceptives were found to be honey, acacia, and colocynth. Egyptian women would soak linen in the mixture and put it in their privates before having intercourse. Acacia contains lactic acid, which has been shown to be a spermicide by science. Scientists have also shown that colocynth naturally induces abortions. Arab women in the present day continue to use colocynth as a contraception. A combination of crocodile dung and fermented bread was used as an Egyptian contraceptive that was injected into a woman's privates. The feces was chemically useless, yet it served as a diaphragm. Virginity wasn't important. The ancient Egyptians didn't care whether a woman was a virgin or not. Back then, they didn't even have a name for a virgin. Premarital sex was legal as long as it occurred between unmarried partners. It's interesting to note that after being married, the pair had to remain true to one another. Adultery was taboo in Egyptian culture. Adulterous behavior resulted in a divorce. The use of whipping, mutilation, or even death as punishment is possible. A spouse often got away with having sex with another woman, particularly if she was unmarried. On the other side, a woman had to be faithful to her husband. It was the only way to establish the legality of their offspring. Ancient Egyptian women were treated equally to men. Men and women enjoyed equal rights in every area, with the exception of profession. In fact, in ancient Egypt, both male and female offspring were coveted. There is no bias. Only housekeeping, sewing, and cooking were offered as careers for women. However, they supported their husband's agricultural job. The women managed the family farms while the husbands were gone. Women had the right to own and inherit property. They had the freedom to run their own enterprises. They could appear in court to present their case. The ability to travel, engage in extramarital relationships, adopt children, and even divorce their spouses were all rights granted to ancient Egyptian women. It's noteworthy to note that women were also pharaohs. Although not often, this did occur. The most famous example is Queen Hatshepsut. On the other hand, royal ladies may have a lot of power via their husbands. Nefertari, for instance, was one of the most influential people in ancient Egypt and was Ramesses II the Great's wife. Extramarital affairs and divorce. Premarital sex was acceptable to the ancient Egyptians, but they also believed that once you became married, you should honor that partnership. They placed a higher value on women since they believed that a married woman was sacrosanct, making extramarital affairs unthinkable, particularly for women. Those found guilty of adultery faced severe penalties. Everything was on the table, including being beaten, disfigured, and in some instances, even put to death. The situation was less difficult for married guys. If a married guy was discovered to have slept with an unmarried woman, he would just have to cope with social stigma. Incest was somehow acceptable. Given that they were the divine's earthly representatives, weddings, or other sexual relationships between members of the nuclear family, parents and children, were frequent among royalty or other eminent classes of priests. They often had privileges that regular family members did not have. King Ptolemy II even exploited the act as a major theme of propaganda, stressing the nature of the couple, which could not be bound by ordinary rules of humanity during the Ptolemaic dynasty. Incest was a common practice in ancient Egypt, and even King Tut was not exempt. His parents were Akhenaten's sister and Akhenaten's brother. 11 mummies that were closely connected to Tutankhamun have recently had their DNA analyzed. The findings proved without a shadow of a doubt that Tutankhamun was the offspring of a first-degree brother-sister connection. Additionally, Tut was married to his half-sister. As a result of the family's extensive inbreeding over several generations, these partnerships naturally came with serious health issues. Even though it was against the law, the practice was nonetheless used to maintain the influence of the ruling family and was not limited to the royal class. Divine masturbation, self-pleasure in ancient Egypt. Masturbation was another taboo that the ancient Egyptians had no problem with. In fact, the act of a male masturbating is seen as practically heavenly. Why? God also accomplished it, therefore. A lot of strange sex tales may be found in the religion of the ancient Egyptians. Although there are other competing origin tales, the one we're interested in depicts the creator deity enjoying himself. According to the period, the first deity, perhaps Atum or Ra, creates himself. Making other gods was his first duty as a deity. He couldn't precisely do this by adultery, as he was the sole entity in existence, so he masturbated and spat forth his sons, Shu and Tefnut. They continued by inventing new gods and goddesses. Briefly put, according to the ancient Egyptians, the world was created largely via masturbation. Therefore, there was no reason to disapprove of it. But what about female masturbation? This question is harder to answer. Again, it's unlikely there was an issue. Since there are few historical instances, it was likely accepted but not questioned. We know the Turin erotic papyrus shows a lady masturbating on a vase. Another famous story is Cleopatra with the bees. To be clear, this assertion has no historical backing. Fire usually precedes smoke, thus the story is still relevant. These historical glimpses serve as a reminder of how cultures, beliefs, and societal norms have shaped humanity's relationship with intimacy and desire over time. While our perspectives may differ from those of ancient times, we can draw wisdom from the diversity of human experiences, fostering a greater understanding and acceptance of the myriad ways in which people express their sensuality. Thanks for watching. See you next time.